Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Eden. So this run kinda started out pretty roughly, and not only because our damage is abysmal at 2.5, but also because our range and shot speed aren't ideal, and of course our speed is not anywhere near good as well. So really, what do we have to lose when we enter the small room? And of course you might ask yourself that question. You walk into the small room and there's Lost waiting in there for you. First of all, you don't have enough speed to outrun him, but you also don't have enough room to actually outmaneuver him. So how can you actually exit, or I would say enter that room and then exit it without taking some hits of damage? I don't think it's actually possible to go and navigate that room without at least taking one hit of damage. But if you're like really good at Isaac and you want to prove me wrong, I would definitely like to see that, because I don't imagine just what I could have possibly done to avoid it there. But also I did take 2 hits of damage, which is obviously very dangerous, because every time Lost touches you, you end up taking one full heart of damage, and because you only have 3 spirit hearts, there's really no way to regenerate them. So what I thought I was gonna do there is just basically die, but somehow I managed to kind of sneak in there and just really finish him off in the last second. But I do imagine if my shots wouldn't have hit, or maybe if I didn't knock him back in a very particular direction at a certain point, then I would have easily taken one more hit of damage and my run would have ended there. So with that said, I feel like if you just get through that room, you're already on a very good spot to actually getting to a somewhat decent score on this one. Obviously that's always something that's gonna happen on these rooms, or at least I would say these dailies, that have a very difficult start before you really have any resources, but at the same time, in this particular case, it could have been easily avoided. I could just not decided to go into that room in the first place. I could have maybe left it for the end of the floor, or if I just saw that I didn't have any improvements, I could have just left the floor and not explored it at all. And that wouldn't have been a problem, because one small room is not really gonna make a difference in the end. It's not gonna make a difference in my end ranking, and the score difference is also gonna be abysmal, so to some extent. So really, there's no point in you risking it if you know that maybe your damage is as bad as it was. Because as soon as you're gonna enter one of the small rooms, it's gonna have something like Ragman in it, and you're just not gonna be able to deal with it, and obviously you're just gonna die. So what I should have done there is just skipped it, go to the boss first, maybe to the shop, buy an additional spirit heart, or maybe get some items, and then maybe try to retry it if it was convenient for me. But if I felt like maybe I was running out of time, or maybe I felt like I'm still not strong enough, I should have just easily ignored it and went on to the next floor. But the reason why I did decide to go to the small room in the very first place was because I feel like they often lead into nothingness, or if they do lead to something, it's usually a dead end, and that's very efficient if you try to explore those rooms first, because that means you have to do less backtracking later on, and that's what I was kind of going for there. And I'm not really sure if it was, I would say, the ideal case scenario. I'm not even sure if that's the actual case or if that's the truth, but that's definitely what I tried to do. So at this point, you can see I actually cut out a big part of this run, mainly because it took so long, but also because it was very monotonous. Basically, I had a blank card, I had a yarrow rune, and to a certain point, I went to the shop, I bought everything there was in the shop except for the battery chargers, and I just started duplicating. And when I got that down, I went to the neighboring room, started duplicating coins. And then in the end, I actually went to the boss trap room, opened up the chest. There were, I think, 3 bombs in there. I started duplicating the bombs, and then eventually, of course, I got to 99 of every consumable, but also managed to hit the max swag limit. So I was in a really good position from that perspective. So you might be wondering, why didn't you go to boss rush first, and then maybe try to break the game with Yara that way? Of course, if we had infinite many charges, and if we had the blank heart plus Yara, why didn't you try to break it in some other way, which would guarantee you getting to boss rush, for example, by forcing a Mama Mega? Well, there's really no particular reason for that, other than I didn't want to invest the time. But what I was going for there is, first of all, I found a blank rune, and I thought that, blank rune is gonna be better for me than a yarrow rune, because it's gonna allow me to essentially go into more floors if a neighbor's rune happens to appear in one of those blank runes. And of course, I can't just leave the blank room behind, because then I lose the yarrow rune and I miss out on the possibility to actually get more points. So what I figured what I was gonna do is actually try to break it on that exact floor, because it's gonna give me something like 7,000 points in total, as opposed to only getting 5,000 points if I did go to boss rush. And then if something like a Mama Mega appeared later on in the run, I could use that, of course, to maybe try and cheese a few more points that way. Then, of course, when I was done with breaking, I picked up every single consumable there was on the ground, and then I picked up the blank rune. And as I was going to the Necropolis. First of all, I was very happy it was a Necropolis XL, because that means we have more rooms, which means we have more chances of actually producing an Aeol's Rune, because of course we have more rooms, which means, that's what I just said. I wanted to say we have more charges because of more rooms, and then of course we can use our blank card even more often, and there's always that innate chance of a blank rune just appearing again after you use it. So I felt like my odds of actually getting an Aeol's Rune here and a crawl space, or at least a trapdoor, were very decent, but for some reason it didn't really want to show up. What's maybe even more ironic is that there was a shovel on that exact floor, and of course if I knew that in advance, what I could have done is broke the game at a certain point with a Yarrow rune. I could have taken the shovel, if I found the devil deal after that, of course, but there was no way of me knowing that there was gonna be a shovel in the devil room, so I just kind of had to stuck with a blank rune and hope for the best. But as it turned out, my wager or my bet here really wasn't all that successful, because like I said, the trapdoor didn't appear. But maybe another lucky coincidence is that the treasure room here had cancer, and of course the cancer does allow you that after the initial hit you take reduced damage, and there was also a sacrifice room which I utilized in this case to actually go to the dark room, and it wasn't even a problem because I had Dark Bomb to generate more health for me, but also because I had a cancer, I took a lot of reduced damage. So in the end here, of course, I went to fight Krampus, I explored the entirety rest of the floor, and then in the end I had an Aeol's Rune, and I also had the blank card. So I had basically two chances of using either one or the other, and I was able to just keep myself safe and not take any damage, or at least not too much damage. And I feel like this was one of the rare dark rooms where I actually gained more points by exploring than losing by taking silly damage. I think I gained something like 1000 points just by exploring the dark room, which is not something that usually happens. But yeah, having the blank rune, not the blank rune, the Aeol's Rune in this case, definitely helped a lot, and I was just able to really get through it without too much trouble. And overall, it was a very, I would say, nasty run. It's not a run you really won because it didn't rely on skill at all. It was just mostly guesswork. It was mostly getting these breaking items and then utilizing them in the best way possible. I'm sure there were ways to really kind of get a better value proposition than I did. For example, I'm sure we could have made boss rush happen at a certain point, and I'm sure that we could have forced a blank rune at some point and try to pay out with that. I mean, for it to generate a crawl space so we could actually get to the next floor, or maybe even force an Aeol's Rune, or maybe force an item which would allow us to hold two runes at once, and of course we could duplicate the blank cards infinitely many times, not the blank runes, the blank runes, not the blank cards, the blank runes infinitely many times, and of course eventually one of them is gonna pay out. That's just of course one of the ideas I've had, and at a certain point then you can use the Forget Me Now to get even more points that way, and I just feel like there's a lot of ways to really go in this one. I decided to go with one which wasn't too terribly convoluted, and I just ended up ranking, I would say, pretty well. I think I ranked 5th in the overall leaderboards, but I really take no pride in this one, because it was mostly luck, it was mostly, I would just say, rash decision making, and in the end, of course, it is what it is. It's still skill to some extent, just by knowledge and knowing that you have to sacrifice certain points to get more points elsewhere, but it definitely felt a little bit cheap, if maybe that's the best way to describe it. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.